there's some parts of your book when you talk about being 8 years old and what's going on in your life at 8 years old in your perspective. And I find it profound how much detail you remember from that time. My daughter right now is 8 years old. So as I listen to your story, I think about being the parent in that situation, what influence I have on my 8-year-old daughter right now. It really impacted me listening to you telling about your life at that age and how you perceive things and what was going on around you. And it's honestly influenced me and how I interact with my daughter.
Hey, it's Angie Mazzell, and welcome to More Like You. This is a podcast where we talk about the pivotal moments and the perspective shifts that shape us and point us towards a life that feels true. You were listening to Ian Levitt, the producer of my audiobook, Girl in the Spotlight. Girl in the Spotlight is about taking a big leap of faith and leaving my career in television news. It also takes a look back at all the pivotal moments that shaped me and shaped my views of success and self-worth. Today, I'm going to take you behind the scenes. I'm going to tell you what it was like to record the story in my voice. I'm going to tell you how I did it, where I did it, and you'll also be hearing my conversation with my audiobook producer, Ian Levitt. In last week's episode 27, I do talk a little bit more about why there was a gap in time between the release of my physical book, Girl in the Spotlight, and now, announcing the audiobook now, and also why I'm so excited about it. Sometimes the timing, even when it takes longer than you think it will, turns out to be just right, because being able to talk about this story again breathes new life into my mission, which is to continue to encourage and inspire people to live honestly and courageously. So when it was time to record the audiobook, I reached out to Ian at Studio Americana. Ian was recommended by my publisher, and we set up a 15-minute Zoom call where we talked about the project. That's where he told me I could actually record this audiobook right here in my house. He asked me about my setup, and I told him that I do a podcast and I have a microphone, and I'm used to creating conditions that are somewhat conducive to recording, although the software that I record into is also really good at taking out extra background noise and kind of doing that extra polishing of the audio so that I can fix things if needed. I live on a busy street. Just a second ago, a delivery person just walked up my stairs and set something on my front porch. In this day and age where we can record and produce content and share it from anywhere, we don't expect things to be perfect. But when you're recording an audiobook, that's a whole different thing. So the expectation of quality and good sound is much higher, but still, Ian said we can do this remotely. But he actually sent me the equipment, the professional studio sounding microphone, the mixer, and a set of headphones. And that's all it was. And I plugged that into my computer, and we set up a time to do a demo session. So on that day, it was very simple. It was just like doing a Zoom call where Ian was on the other end. He was listening to me record the first chapter of my book, and he was also making those edits, managing the retakes, cleaning it up, and then he sent it back to me. So again, what was really cool about this process is even though Ian was in Minneapolis, I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, he is literally right there in the room with me. So for the demo session, we recorded for about 30 minutes. And then on his end, he did whatever magic he does, edited out all the retakes, put it together in one file, and sent it back to me. And we both agreed that it sounded really good, that the quality was good. But Ian told me that in the room I was actually not in this room where I record my podcast. I have a closet upstairs that I had intended to turn into maybe a backup podcast closet. But that room produced a little bit of echo. And he was able to make that echo magically go away. He said, but if you could do anything, maybe put some more blankets, maybe hang a blanket on the wall, something like that to dampen the sound and help reduce that echo. And I said I could do that, and I thought about it for a minute, but the other issue is there is a window in that room. And I didn't realize I lived on such a noisy street until I tried to read one chapter of my book. There's always somebody doing some sort of landscaping. There are delivery drivers going up and down the road, and we live on a flight path. We don't live that close to the airport, but we are most certainly on a flight path. And we had to continue to stop while I'm like, hold on. At one point, I walked down the stairs and looked out on my porch to see if the guy blowing leaves was almost finished. But we got it finished. And in the end, you would never know that things were that noisy in and around me because Ian, again, was able to work his magic. But we knew that wasn't a good long-term solution. So rather than try to figure out how to make that room work, I decided to move into my bedroom closet. It's so funny, even as I'm telling this story, I can hear someone down the road cutting, doing something with the weed whacker or blowing leaves. But again, I doubt you can hear it. If you can, it's not really that big of a deal. But again, for an audiobook, we couldn't be in that situation. So I went into my bedroom closet, and it is not a large closet. It's a walk-in closet, but my husband and I share it, and it's a square. But I dragged my desk into the closet. I hung up every blanket that I own. I took every pillow in the house and stuffed it in all of the open spaces, inside the shelves, up on the top of the shelves. I covered the hardwood floor, and I shut myself in the closet. I took a video, and then I sent the video to the family group chat. And I was like, the glamorous life of being an author. And they started replying, my husband and my sons, and they were like, more pillows. And I was like, wait, are you making fun of me? Or are you saying I actually need more pillows? And they were like, more pillows, kind of like more cowbell. So they were just joking me. I probably overdid it, but it worked. And so that is where I recorded my audiobook. 1 hour at a time, I would just go on Ian's calendar and I would schedule my time for the week. And this is what I worked on throughout the fall. And then over the holiday break, we listened to the final version of the book after Ian had made all the edits. And then we got it uploaded. We sent it out into space to all the places that deliver audiobooks. I wanted it to be widely distributed. I had a choice to make. If I had gone exclusively with Audible, I would have made a higher percentage. My royalties would be higher if I was exclusive with Audible. And I thought about this. I asked a couple of friends, like, where do you listen to your audiobooks? And it's true that Audible has the majority of the market, but not everybody gets their books from Audible. And some people may want to check it out from the library. And I have a good relationship with my local library. And I thought there's a possibility that my audiobook could be available with them. And my goal is to get my book in the hands of as many people as possible. And that's another reason I recorded the audiobook. Not everyone is a reader. They prefer to listen to books in audio form. So in the end, I opted for a wide distribution. It's one of those things you could truly go either way, but that is just sort of what my instincts were telling me to do. I had a gut feeling that that was the path I wanted to take. I will say it wasn't always that convenient to have my closet turned into a recording studio. It was a lot of working around the desk and kind of pulling back blankets and moving pillows over so I could get to my clothes. That part was not the most convenient thing, but to be able to do this in my home at 1 hour chunks at a time and at a more relaxed pace really turned out to be a wonderful experience. So today I'm so excited to share with you my conversation with Ian Levitt about the recording of my audiobook, Girl in the Spotlight. Listen in.
What was it about the audiobook process that you found most surprising?
Surprising. So
Yeah.
I think that I ended up enjoying it much more than I thought. Coming from broadcasting, there's an aspect of it that is people assume would come naturally, but it's really awkward to read your book. And I did feel nervous and awkward at the beginning. And then all of a sudden, I relaxed and really got into the story and the process. And it really was something that I enjoyed doing. And I started to feel more like myself through the process of reading my own story. And I think that is the most surprising thing. And it was when people ask me how it was to record an audiobook, that was what I would say. It's like, it's really kind of fun. And I didn't realize it was going to be so fun.
What did drive you to after you published your book to say I want to do an audiobook as well?
It was always something that was kind of on my bucket list to do and I wanted to do. And I had talked to my publisher about producing an audiobook, and it wasn't a service that they yet provided. And it was one of those things that sort of sat on my list. And right after my book came out, my mom got sick, and I had to kind of be in this caregiver role while I was doing the book tour, the book press. Things just kept getting bumped down the list. And a year went by, and I kept seeing audiobook on my list. And I just kept feeling like this is something you want to do. And if you're going to do it, the time is now. And we did that initial call. I realized this was going to be an easier process than I even imagined.
When you talk to other people about doing an audiobook, what is the impression you get from your friends? Are people were people asking you to do the audiobook? Was it something you wanted to do yourself more? What is your impression of what the people around you think about audiobooks?
I feel like my friends, they're sort of split. You've got some people who they don't listen to audiobooks, and then other people who almost exclusively listen to audiobooks. So
there's still a mindset among, I think, some authors that they don't want to do an audiobook because they really only want people to experience the book the one way. And I think for some people this is going away, but I think people have felt like it's it's just not the same experience for the consumer, really, because whether you're listening or reading, you're consuming the book. So it isn't as though I'm getting some different information listening than I am reading it.
I felt like there was something important about my story, since it's a memoir, it's so personal, that to have it in my voice could be an extra element. That I might have people out there who've intended to read my book, but they haven't gotten around to it for a million reasons. We're super busy. A lot of people aren't readers, so they might be more inclined to listen to the story. So that was the reason I really wanted to do it, was to experience my book in my voice and hopefully opening up the audience and people who haven't experienced my book yet.
You mentioned earlier that after a while you got comfortable reading the book after feeling a little trepidation at the beginning. What do you think changed?
Honestly, it was moving to my closet. It really was, because we started in a space that I thought would be okay. And there was a little bit of echo, and I kept hearing street noise, landscapers, somebody's cutting a tree down, things like that. And I just decided to go into it's not a huge closet, but it is a walk-in closet, and put all the blankets and pillows and everything that I owned, and really set and dragged my desk in there. And it did two things. First, it made it soundproof to me, so I didn't have to worry anymore that, oh, there's an airplane flying overhead, or here's the UPS driver causing all this noise. So that level of anxiety went down. And there was something about that setting. I felt very cozy, and almost I sounded different in my ears. And I suddenly felt comfortable in my space. And somewhere in that, I just slipped into my cadence that felt like, okay, this is I finally started sounding like a voice I recognized.
What was your overall opinion of recording this in a remote way?
So I originally imagined going to the studio and it being a couple of days of, intense, longer form recording. And I think there's something about that looks glamorous and would have been fun to showcase on social media. And I would have done that. Like I would have flown to Minneapolis to do this, except when you said we really don't need to do that, I was like, that would be great because there is a convenience of doing it in your own home on your own time. And I like how to do it that way, we could schedule 1 hour at a time. So the process took longer, but it was much more relaxed. And I never really burned out because you were right. You said an hour and a half is about how long someone can truly go and have that energy. The thing I want to note too is having you live with me. That's the piece that you really want when you're doing a project like this, is feeling like you have a collaborator and that listening ear, the producer. What is your background? Did you worked in radio?
I did. Yeah, I started in radio when I was 15 years old at a country radio station doing overnights, which I wasn't even legally supposed to do at the time at 15. But I kept going I kept getting jobs. I worked in radio for 20 years with no break. Sometimes I was working multiple radio stations at once, oldies, talk, classic rock, modern rock, all sorts of different stuff. So I did that for 20 years. I really enjoyed it. And I even did a little TV. Like most people, you would know what a master control operator is, but that was a job I did for a while, which is basically you're in charge of making sure that the station is airing what's supposed to be airing at the right time and recording things off satellite, stuff like that. But yeah, my background was a lot of on-air radio. Towards the end of it, I was helping manage radio stations. I helped someone start up a low-power radio station. So, big background in broadcasting, and kind of saw where at least radio broadcasting was kind of going as compared to where podcasting was going. And I wanted to jump into podcasting, which I did in 2017. Before, it got to be the level it is now, where every company has a podcast now. I knew that was going to be the case back in 2017, and I started this company saying, "Hey, let's get this out there. I've got an idea of what I think people want for production services for podcasting, but let's go out there and find out." And I was able to make a lot of, pivots during those first several years to make sure that we were matching what the market is looking for. And now I like audiobooks even more than podcasts.
Do you enjoy, having worked in the broadcasting business and for other people, do you like working for yourself?
I love it. Yes, I do. I mean, it's a different kind of challenge. At the end, the buck stops with you on everything, right? So that was not something I was used to, just being an employee. At the end of the day, I could more or less go home and not think too much about work. But when you own your own business, whatever it is, you're thinking about it pretty much 24/7. But I get to pick the people I work with. I get to pick projects I like. I get to, frankly, again, pivoting, I get to pivot very quickly when I feel like we need to change something. And so I think having, that ability to be nimble and a business owner, I've really enjoyed.
Now, tell me about starting to work with authors and do audiobooks. Like, how did that come about?
That came about in our first year of the studio. We had just opened, intending to be a podcast studio. We had a physical location here in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I started getting inquiries from people saying, "Hey, would you ever record an audiobook?" And I thought, well, it really is a lot of we're using the same equipment as we are for podcasting, definitely a different process. But I decided to say, yeah, let's try it out a little bit. After some trial and error, mostly on my part, we've continued to always develop our processes to just get better and better at it. It's turned into, while I do love producing podcasts, audiobooks are my favorite part of what we do here.
When you're listening to an author, are you able to follow along with the book and really get what the book is about? Because as we experience, there's many retakes. It's reading a sentence or two and then rereading that sentence again. And so what is that experience for you taking in someone else's story?
I mean, I love it. I think I definitely, on the first round when we're recording together and I'm marking things down as we go along, I'm listening with a different part of my brain than I would just relaxing and listening to a book. It's just a more technical process in the moment. So I get the gist of the book for sure, whatever project I'm doing, but I don't really I don't absorb it like I would when I'm going through the review. And that's the cool thing is, even though that's not necessarily the case in the initial recordings, by the time we've edited it and gone through the review process, okay, now I feel like I know the book. And I'll even hear parts that I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I didn't even notice that during the recordings because I was just thinking about it on a more technical level.
Were there any stories within my story about working in broadcasting or any of the themes in my personal story that you felt like you could relate to?
Oh, yeah, tons. I feel like, just that atmosphere, that environment of working in live broadcasting and the personality types that you talk about that you worked with in it, very similar to a lot of the people that I've worked with. The dynamics of working inside a TV station are similar to a radio station. I think they're probably a little more high stakes than radio, but even in radio, a lot of those personality types and a lot of those team dynamics work out very similar to what you experienced as well. And like you, I had someone tell me early on, you should go into radio. And it inspired me. It made me feel like, when I was growing up, my parents always had the radio on. I always thought the people on the radio sounded so cool. And I was just beside myself when I walked into a radio station, had no experience, and just said, hey, do you need anything here that I can do? And they said, well, yeah, we just fired this overnight person on the weekends. How do you want to do that? And I said, yes, great. So, I think you talk about it in your book as well, too, like opportunity. It's about seeing those opportunities and kind of, checking them out. And they don't always work out, but, when they do and when you get your foot in that door, especially in TV and radio, and you get people to know you and you're a decent person to work with, I feel like you can really make a good career out of it.
So you're listening to my story, and it's about being in the business and leaving that business, but also my personal backstory woven in. And we experienced in real time me pressing up against real emotion when I suddenly had to read out loud, major points in my story of loss and disappointment. Have you been in that kind of situation with an author before? Because I feel like you coached me through that and were very patient, but also had this really good listening ear for that. We need to retake that because, it maybe sounds like you're crying, but also that has the right amount of emotion. We should keep that, which I thought was really special. And that was another thing you had asked me earlier, what surprised me, that piece, that I got emotional. And then also that was kind of really cool.
Yeah.
To have that witness and still have to get yourself together and read through it.
And there were a couple of parts where we kept it in. It's not like you were sobbing, but you could hear that there was real emotion. You were really feeling that moment in the book. I thought it came across great. I don't know what you thought. Listening back to some of those moments, I thought it was very authentic.
Yeah, and I agree. And then I wonder if that is a skill you learned in real time. Have you been in those situations with authors before?
Yes. For whatever reason, a lot of our audiobooks have been memoirs. And when you have a memoir, I don't know how you have a memoir without having some strong emotion throughout your life. I mean, if you're motivated enough to write about the life you've had, odds are good that there is a roller coaster of emotions involved in that. And I to your answer, or to your question, I think I have learned it in real time. One of the things I thought when I started this business was my background in radio and dealing with all the different personality types that you find in media was going to help me kind of in these situations as well, really be able to be with people and also continue moving forward on the project that we're working on. Over time, I've just developed, I'm going to use the word skill, but really there's a lot of empathy involved in it.
Yeah.
It's like, you're experiencing a real moment, and there are some times, like you say, where it's like, no, we're going to pause and we can retake this, and it's totally fine. And there's other times where it's like, a little bit of this is right in this part of the book. There's some parts of your book when you talk about being 8 years old and what's going on in your life at 8 years old and your perspective. And I find it profound how much detail you remember from that time. My daughter right now is 8 years old. So as I listen to your story, I think about being the parent in that situation, what influence I have on my 8-year-old daughter right now. That was, I think, really, it really impacted me listening to you telling about your life at that age and how you perceive things and what was going on around you. And it's honestly influenced me and how I interact with my daughter right now at that same age.
Thank you for that. That means a lot. It also affects how I parent too. So thank you for adding that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So that was my conversation with Ian Levitt of Studio Americana after we had completed the production of my audiobook, Girl in the Spotlight. Ian's comment about how listening to the story helped him think about how he interacts with his daughter really reminded me of why I believe the story is so important. I listened to the book in its entirety 2 to 3 times. And the first time, and actually the second time, I listened through it all the way to the end, past the acknowledgments, the author bio, at the very end where I'm like, and I'm Angie Mazzell, the end. When I hear myself say the end, I just cried. And I'm like, where's this emotion coming from? But I think that is just the byproduct of doing any kind of work that feels truly meaningful and realizing that it is done. I feel so proud of this work, but I also feel like now it is something that is completely separate from me. It has become its own thing. It is out in the world for all of you to find. I wrote this book for a woman at a crossroads who is ready to step into a new chapter of her life, a chapter that feels true. You can find the physical copy of Girl in the Spotlight online anywhere books are sold. If you are in Charleston, South Carolina, you can find it at the Barnes & Noble in West Ashley and Mount Pleasant. And the audiobook is now available on Audible, Apple Audiobooks, Spotify, and lots of other places that you like to listen to audiobooks. I hope you will read it, that you will listen to it, that it will meet you where you are. And I hope it's a book you'll tell others about. I hope you'll share it with a friend who needs it too. Thank you for listening to More Like You. I'm Angie Mazzell, and I'll see you back here next week.